plan would have been written off right from the start. But you survived. You went straight down to hell, and they pulled you out. Your eye wide open. Full of venom. The days of naked Snake are long gone. Welcome back, Venom Snake.
Did Venom Snake survive? It's a question that some ask, especially newcomers to the series. Those who may have experienced the Phantom Pain for the first time and then played the MSX games where it all started. As we know, in the Outer Heaven Uprising in 1995, Solid Snake defeated who he believed was the real Big Boss. But as MGS5 has told us through typical MGS retcons, Big Boss had a body double who continued his legend.
This story, this legend, it's ours. We can change the world and with it the future.
In Metal Gear 2, Solid Snake, a military advisor named George Kasler assists Snake in his mission and explains Big Boss was rumoured to be the first test subject for the Snatcher Project after suffering injuries and the loss of body parts during the Outer Heaven Uprising, alluding to Venom Snake. Supposedly he'd lost both his hands, his feet, his right eye and his right ear, but somehow he survived. And when Outer Heaven got bombed, Venom was used as a guinea pig in Dr. Madnar's Snatcher Project, turning him into a cyborg. According to this account, Madnar himself directed the experiment with the backing of an Eastern Bloc leader, and Big Boss was returned to health as a cyborg in Zanzibar land. Bear in mind, this was just a rumour, and an interesting one nonetheless that may hold some validity. Known as the father of robotics, Madnar was responsible for designing Metal Gear TX55 and Metal Gear D, and most certainly merging human with machine as suggested, capable of creating cyborgs or cybroids, a combination of organic and mechanical parts, such as the TX11 Bloody Brats. Essentially, together they're both artificial and biological. Of course, Dr. Madnar saved Raiden's life, who at the time was made into a cyborg by the Patriots, just like Frank Jaeger. In the Guns of the Patriots, he saved Raiden again, after he sustained terrible injuries in his fight with Vamp. He also got provided with a white blood dialysis machine, as more than likely as well as having his suit fixed, and this alone tells us what Kasler may have said might have some truth.
Dr. Madnar, he saved my life.
So if Venom Snake did survive, then where is Big Boss in all of this? Perhaps keeping in the shadows like before.
He'll act as the new Big Boss, and the act just isn't for Cypher. He'll be your face on the world stage, until the time comes for your resurgence.
It's worth noting when Outer Heaven got blown to pieces by NATO, Big Boss went and rescued as many people as he could to take back to his secret nation of Zanzibar, something he was most likely establishing during the Phantom Pain or after, whilst also maintaining Outer Heaven until Diamond Dogs and Venom became its stead. It appears that Venom Snake dies at the hands of Solid Snake. I mean, we did blast him with a few missiles. But let's just say he did survive, and Big Boss rescued him, using Dr. Madnar to replace his missing limbs and revive him as the Cyborg Ninja, half human and half machine. The world would still believe that Big Boss died, keeping his cover intact. Perhaps Solid Snake faces Venom once again, unbeknownst of the ruse. But it seems very unlikely, because as we're told, Big Boss gets caught in the destruction of Zanzibar after being defeated by Solid Snake and is placed inside an induced coma, and then thus his missing limbs are replaced with his son's, all perfect components to match his body type.
You, Solid Snake, his own clone, foiled his efforts both times. Big Boss and Grey Fox, Frank Jaeger, were left near death. Zero recovered their bodies.
It would make no sense if Venom did survive and the whole world found out about the Zanzibar disturbance, only for Big Boss to stick around and get caught in the smoke, I suppose. But it is implied in MGS5's credits that Venom did indeed die in Outer Heaven, cementing the canonicity of the series lore. According to Metal Gear Solid 4's database, people have come to this conclusion. The database was operating under the original assumption that the big boss you fight at the end of each MSX game was the same person. It's clear that Kojima at the time hadn't considered the plot of MGS5. Also, it leaves out that George Kasler, the person who gives you this information in MG2, warned that Snatcher thing is only a rumour, and it may not be true, and MGS5 just completely shuts that shit down. But interestingly, Kojima spoke in an article when asked about whenever a lore bible is at hand at Kojima Productions, which would be pretty cool, right, to get one in your hands on one of those things. But as it explained, they don't actually keep a lore bible or any formal written documentation about their own creative approach. Instead, Kojima depends on his core team people who have been at the studio for years and just get how things work, I suppose. That these veterans understand what the studio tries to stay consistent and what they're always pushing to do differently. Kojima's approach is about passing the knowledge down directly from person to person rather than writing it all down, and admittedly it's one of his flaws. He even tried making formal design bibles before, but nobody ended up reading them, so he figured it made more sense to just teach people directly, I suppose. The one thing they do write down the development are detailed notes, and basically like book reports that clearly spell out what the player will be doing at different points in the game. But the bigger picture stuff and the studio's overall philosophy and creative vision that lives with the people, not in some document. When asked if Metal Gear's famously complex story was intentional or just a result of such a long-running series, Kojima was clear that the complexity has never been his goal. But somehow I beg to differ. I mean, this stuff is quite complex.
Or is it one of the S3 plan's proud achievements?
What are you talking about?
But according to him, he's not deliberately trying to make things complicated. What he actually aims for is something that appears simple and easy to grasp on the surface, but when you look closer, there's depth and detail to discover. Ideally, when you zoom back out, the main story should still feel pretty straightforward. He states that he doesn't plan everything out from the beginning, that he thinks about each game's story after finishing the previous one, hence what explains the gaps or retcons rather than having the entire saga mapped out from day one. When you work that way, he explains, sometimes narrative threads get lost and shift direction, or hit dead ends, and when that happens he has to create new storylines to keep things moving forward. His philosophy is that he won't sacrifice what he wants to achieve in the current story just to keep everything perfectly consistent with what came before. That sometimes you have to accept inconsistencies to make the story work the way that you want it to. And thankfully, Metal Gear Solid's retcons really aren't too harmful to the overall saga. The beauty is that some is left open for interpretations, as MGS5 beautifully presented. It is interesting to see Kojima's process over the MGS series that confirms his statements. It feels like the Snatcher Project, or replacing missing parts with cyber limbs, that would go on to massively shape the future of the series, especially Metal Gear Solid Revengeance, which all predates all the way back to Kojima's 1988 game Snatcher.
Snatcher!
Gillian!
We have Professor Lorraine. We only require her cooperation for a short period here at the Kremlin.
The game is named after the titular biomechanical creatures and Dr. Petrovich Madnar, who appears in both the original Metal Gear games and in Snatcher, sharing the same name.
I am Elijah Madnar, the only son of Professor Petrovich Madnar.
Once again showing Kojima's repurposing coming into effect as we've seen throughout the series.
Pleased to meet you, Gillian. I am Metal Gear Mach 2.
Sorry to keep you waiting, Snake.
Allow me to introduce Metal Gear Mark II.
Metal Gear.
Whilst MGS5 changes things, with it all aside, it's interesting to think what could have been if Kojima would have never considered creating the Phantom as Big Boss's counterpart. The direction of MGS5 may have been entirely different. Perhaps Diamond Dogs would have never existed, but rather we would have seen Outer Heaven established in Galsburg in South Africa, as Big Boss originally intended since Peace Walker, where players would have built their nation like Mother Base, albeit on land rather than offshore, still taking mission contracts to further establish. And this may have also included Big Boss coming across Sniper Wolf rather than Quiet, and Big Boss helping Frank Jaeger and Naomi to the States, as well as recruiting his famous mercenaries Solid Snake later fights. And it's here as well that Big Boss could have met important characters like Kyle Schneider, who is the architect of Outer Heaven, as well as using Madnar to build the TX-55 Metal Gear with in-game mechanics similar to Peace Walker building Zeke. But most importantly, seeing Big Boss return to the US, taking command of Foxhound, which would most likely happen at the beginning of the game. Ground Zeroes could still fit, however it probably would have to be a longer game, and Skullface would most probably needed to be defeated at that point, scrapping the whole idea of him being a part of Big Boss's cleanup crew, because let's be honest, the majority of the people fucking hate it.
His first mission. Any mess you made, I was there to clean up. You completed your task, and admirably.
Of all the things in the world that have never happened, that has never happened the most. That is the most didn't happen shit of all time.
But just as a simple antagonist out to, kill Big Boss and get back at Zero definitely could work, and, the one and done antagonist is nothing uncommon in Metal Gear. With Big Boss's base destroyed, he would abandon everything and gets in contact with Ocelot and heads directly to the US for his plans, where we see him train a young Solid Snake as opposed to Venom and Liquid Snake's interactions. It's here we'd also see Miller working alongside during his time as a drill sergeant in Foxhound, referred to as Hell Master or Master Miller to his peers.
Snake, this is McDonald Miller. It's been a long time.
Master, what are you doing here?
I quit being a boot camp instructor, so I moved out here for some peace and quiet. I'm in retirement, just like you.
Heard explosion.
No! That is not! Train us like a damn no!
However, according to sources, it isn't clear when he joined, but it points to him joining after the events of Outer Heaven and more towards Zanzibar land. It's more than likely after the events of Ground Zeroes, Big Boss would have left Miller to die, which makes more sense why he holds such resentment as we've seen in the Phantom Pain, and for why he later supports Snake in his mission. Just like MGS5, the game could end leading to what was presented in the MSX games, where instead of Venom being informed of the US Operation Intrude with Solid Snake's arrival, it could have shown the real Big Boss gearing up ready for the fight, realising his ploy of being Solid Snake's commander and assuming he would perish, turns to the door and faces his son, ending on the same premises of the Phantom Pain. And when you think about it, the Phantom Pain kinda plays out what I feel like MGS5 may originally have been, but of course was switched. But this is just a bit of daydreaming or headcanon based on the actual events of the story that I'm sure we've all thought about. But Kojima Productions probably more than likely did think of this at first before creating the story we eventually got, with one of the best plot endings I think we've ever seen in gaming. And I'm truly glad with what we got, but there's no doubt many people would have loved to have seen the original ideas kept intact, with only one boss, but there's something narratively well written about Big Boss having a body double carrying on his legacy hiding from the world. The original plan in the early Metal Gear lore suggests that Big Boss may or would have become a heavily cybergenetic character, but this was more of a Snatcher reference Easter egg, and by the time MGS5 came around, it's more than likely the ideas for Venom Snake most certainly could have stemmed from all of this. The brilliance lies within Venom Snake's tragedy that makes his involvement weaved into the MSX games far more impactful. That Kojima wrote a character that wasn't just tied to Big Boss's legacy, but one that had his own ideals. and understood the boss's will far greater than Big Boss himself by suggesting the world no longer needs the gun compared to Big Boss who needs it. He becomes like many others in the series who doesn't get to choose his own fate, but rather shaped by outside forces.
Someday the world will no longer need us. No need for the gun, or the hand to pull the trigger. I have to drive out this demon inside me. Build a better future. That's what we will leave as our legacy. Another mission, right, boss?
The Codex by Kasler doesn't take away from the lore neither, since it's just a baseless rumour, but one I think that neatly calls back to Venom unintentionally since MGS5, and Dr. Madnar more than likely in Outer Heaven would have been developing all kinds of cyber prosthetics for Venom Snake. It feels like even in death, his legend still remains honoured as Big Boss promised at the end of MGS5 in The Man Who Sold the World tape. That they are one entity, that he doesn't die as a nameless medic, but rather takes Big Boss's legendary history even further, a shining light even in death.
He's the two of us together. Where we are today, we built it. This story, this legend, it's ours. We can change the world and with it the future. I am you and you are me. Carry that with you wherever you go. Thank you, my friend.
Some fans have even argued that the chronology should have been reversed. They suggest it would have made more sense if the final enemy in MG1 was the real Big Boss, while Venom replaced him in MG2. Their reasoning goes like this, that Solid Snake must have known what Big Boss looked like before the end of MG1. So wouldn't he be confused as to why the man suddenly has scars and lashes across his face and a horn sticking out of his head, and a literal robot arm? And then when Solid Snake sees Big Boss again in MG2, he looks better than ever, healthy, cleaned up, and with both of his arms, and no shrapnel in his head, which by the way the Doctor clearly states in the Phantom Pain, removing it is certain death.
Even if we were to extract it, you would most likely suffer a brain hemorrhage.
The fans believe it should have been the real Big Boss, John, who Snake fought in MG1. After their battle, Solid would have merely left him wounded, sure, but badly hurt, but not necessarily dead, before escaping out to heaven, which then explodes far into the distance. Interestingly, Big Boss mutters to Snake after his defeat, with certain words that they should finish their fight someday, and they are fitting either way round, as Venom realising that even with him dead, the real Big Boss will want to settle the score with Snake, and vice versa. And as some have implied, that would leave plenty of time for Eva or the Patriots to extract Big Boss and reconstruct his body for him to return decades later at the end of MGS4.
Under certain conditions, someone can be made to play a specific role. Act like someone else.
So let's just bring it all together. We started with the question, could Venom Snake have survived Outer Heaven like the old rumours suggested Big Boss did? The Snatcher Project codec from Metal Gear 2 painted a picture of Big Boss as a cyborg with replaced limbs, and Dr. Madnar certainly had the skills to pull it off. But when MGS5 came along, Kojima retconned this entire idea. The game's ending makes it clear that Venom dies at Outer Heaven, and the cyborg Big Boss story was just an Easter egg reference to Kojima's 1988 game. But one can kinda wonder with their own headcanon that perhaps maybe Venom Snake was repurposed, maybe to play a specific role. Maybe as Python Selkin brothers suggested, that maybe he was repurposed as the cyborg ninja as Grey Fox. Maybe the real Frank Yeager died a long time ago, and the Frank Yeager we see in Metal Gear Solid 1 is actually Venom Snake, who underwent the same kind of mind control and surgery as he did at the start of Metal Gear Solid 5 to make him into the man he would become. Personally, I don't buy into it, but I still admire it as a cool theory, and one nonetheless that is just like any other that many people come up with in the series. There's always rooms left open for interpretation for people to perceive how Metal Gear truly is. Well, what do you guys think? Did you like the way MGS5 handled the legacy of the series, or would you have preferred it to stick to the original ideas? There's a reason why we love this series so much and why I make the videos I do, because the themes are so interwoven poetically. MGS5 makes us take on the identity of someone else, and whereas MGS2 makes us decide for ourselves who we want to be.
That's your name as of today. You best change your face, too.
I'll pick my own name and my own life. I'll find something worth passing on.
And to all you Metal Gear Solid nutjobs out there, ignore the haters. Keep on theorizing with these wild ideas, because this is what keeps the spirit of Metal Gear Solid alive. It's truly a never game over. I don't know about you guys, but to me it still feels like this isn't over. Well, with all that being said, I just want to thank you all so much for watching, and if you're new, please consider subscribing for more Metal Gear content. Until we meet again.
9 years ago in that helicopter, he threw himself between you and the blast. In that moment, the man you knew died. He died protecting you. And now, by becoming you, he protects you again.